There's a lot of ideas all over the place. They float everywhere. If you've got the internet, you can get a gazillion and 12 ideas for what makes a great marriage. I have an idea. I think I know the source for where to go to figure out what makes a great marriage. We're looking at that source in 1 Peter. This is not the only place in the Bible where there are direct instructions about what makes a great marriage, but this is one of the places. We're in 1 Peter chapter 3, beginning in verse 7. We started last time with husbands in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. That's the first phrase that Peter writes under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. I think I could say it's reasonable for me to maybe paraphrase this and say, hey guys, if you want to have a great, fulfilling, godly marriage, here, guys, this is not about what your wife needs to be or do. This is about you. So guys, can I have your attention, please? I'm told there's the old story of, years ago, the Green Bay Packers, when they first got together, coach for every season, Coach Lombardi would get everybody together in the same room. And he would get to the front of the group and he would hold up a football and say, gentlemen, this is a football. And from there he would flesh out what they were going to do. And every preseason, every year, they did the same thing. They worked on the fundamentals. And something must have been right about that, because Coach Vince Lombardi is an icon of fantastic coaches in the history of the National Football League. Peter writes, guys, this is a football. He doesn't start with you need to be a good provider. He doesn't start with you need to be a good dad. He doesn't start with he starts with be considerate as you live with your wives. And we talked about that last time. Considerate. Think through. I'm going to reemphasize one of the conclusions I drew is we must, as guys, we got to think about what does our wife need? What I didn't include in that I want to come back to is, if you're going to live considerately, to be considerate of your wives as you live with them, one of the smartest things you can do, it's kind of revolutionary and it's kind of out on the edge, but I'm going to recommend it. Guys, get your wife, just the two of you, she and he. This may be more difficult when your kids, wait a minute, did I say maybe? This will definitely be more difficult when your kids are young, but it is worth the investment of the cost of getting a setter who you can rely on and depend on, who you trust, and get away. You don't have to make it. You don't go to Delmonico's necessarily. You don't have to have a big steak dinner. I mean, you could go to Dunkin' Donuts. The point is, it's just the two of you. And then you need to look into her eyes and say, honey, if honey's, in your vocabulary for one another, honey, what could I do for you right now that would matter, that would help? Well, in our world, we have so many demands, both husbands and wives, moms and dads, the slowing down to say, what could I do for you right now that would help? That's probably not going to get to the table. It's all about what's the current crisis? What do we need to do next? And we often assume the other is going to know what should be done next. Guys, pay attention to your wife. She's throwing you hints all the time. And sometimes in her frustration, they are not the most shall I say, encouraging. There's sometimes little humor in it. And a lot of the reason for that, guys, is she is probably stomping out more fires with the kids, if you've got kids, than you are. And her level of frustration rises. You can't make that go away, but you can at least address it. A husband who is considerate of the needs of his wife will ask, what could I do? How can I help you now? One of the interesting things I think about this is that a lot of times when a husband will ask a wife that question, it takes her so by surprise, catches her so off guard, she doesn't know what to do with it. She may need some time to reflect on, I'm not sure what I need. And some of this is because she may be laboring under the impression that she's got to get herself taken care of by herself. And that's not God's design. It's not God's design that you're responsible. You are completely, solely responsible for your wife's well-being. No. But it's also not honest. It's not truthful. It's not God's design that she's totally, absolutely responsible for her own care and upkeep. We have become one flesh as husband and wife, which is obviously done in a physical act of intimacy, but that is a physical manifestation of what's supposed to have been happening within our hearts, within our emotions, within our wills, within our affections. That we now become a unit. And husbands, when Peter writes, be considerate as you live with your wives, he means learn how to discover her needs and to do what you can to be a part of God's instrumentation to meet her needs. Only God can meet all her needs. But you get to be used by God to meet some of her primary needs. There's an interesting book, if you're interested in reading, I think I've referenced it before, by a guy named Willard Harley. It's called His Needs, Her Needs. And in 25 years of marriage counseling, he assimilated the 5 greatest needs that wives have and the 5 greatest needs that husbands have. And he flushes those things out in a very easy to understand and very reliable way. These are not the only needs that they have, but they are 5 needs, and they are not exactly the same. They're certainly not perceived as the same by husbands and wives. The point I'm trying to make is there are resources available to you, guys, that can help you be considerate as you live with your wives. Just one more little tool I want to pitch as a possibility for you is one that another PhD guy wrote. He wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages. His name is Dr. Gary Chapman. Don't confuse him with the country music / contemporary Christian music artist Gary Chapman. Different people. Dr. Chapman described 5 basic ways that people perceive love. And usually these are 5 separate ways that people extend love, express love. One of the ways that you can be considerate as you live with your wife is to discover her love language and speak it as often as you possibly can. There are, 40 or 70 different ways that a guy can pursue this idea of being considerate as he lives with his wife. Be considerate, be thoughtful, be deeply thoughtful, profoundly thoughtful, and then act on your thoughtfulness. Be considerate as you live with your wives. See, this is not some ivory tower kind of thing. This is on the runway. You live with your wives. You live life together. And so set yourself up to not need some extraordinary, some kind of wonderful, unrealistic setting in which to express your love for your wife. And don't be one-dimensional so that you love her in only one way. That's the opposite of what he's talking about. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect. Now, there's more to that phrase, but it is important. We live in a culture where women must be. I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say it in a condemning, shaming way, but our culture has taken us to a place where it is required that women be respected in the marketplace. You can be written up, you can even be fired with cause if you treat women in the workplace disrespectfully. Now, I realize there are parts of the country that's never going to happen, but there are parts of the country where it happens every day. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that what happened in times past is that men failed to treat women with respect. Husbands failed to treat women with their wives with respect. Peter says, treat them with respect. What does that look like? How do you treat people who you respect? Well, one of the things that you don't do in that setting is you don't talk them down, and you don't talk down to them. When you treat someone with respect, I want you to think about the biggest boss in your company. When you're in their presence, it would not be smart for you to be flippant. It would not be smart for you to try to talk down to them, right? When you meet the president, even if you're of an opposing party, you need to show respect. Peter writes, treat them, your wives. These wives that you've been considerate as you have lived with them, treat them with respect. I think maybe one of the reasons God gave me 3 daughters is because I needed to learn how to respect women. I grew up, graduated from high school in 1971. It was kind of a turbulent time, the tail end of the turbulence mainly, but was the front end of the women's liberation movement, and I was brought up under the idea that women's liberation was a communist plot. Although I will say there were things about how it was done, this women's liberation thing may have overextended its meaningful, useful reach because it became less about how do women gain the regard and respect that they deserve as human beings, and more how do we punish men for being men. I'm not in for that. But I am in for the idea that Christian men should treat Christian women with respect. And husbands, you are directly commanded to treat your wife with respect. And then he goes on to say, and this whole thing has been distorted over time in such a way that I think it has ruined its actual meaning. Treat them with respect as the weaker partner. Now, when you think about the weaker partner, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. I think a lot of people think about the weaker partner as the less important partner. I don't believe that. I do not believe that at all. And I don't think Peter is writing about the intellectual weakness, certainly not the personal weakness of wives. It is fairly clear that there is a distinct difference in the physical strength between a man and a woman. And Peter says, even though there is this distinct difference in the physical strength of a man and the physical strength of a woman, it does not make it okay to show this physically weaker one disrespect. We're going to come back to what does this look like? What does it mean? And how do you show respect, treat your wife with respect as the weaker partner? And then there's more to it, but we're out of time right now. So I'll come back to that next time. Bring somebody with you, okay? On to Soul Care with Stevie Boy.